Welcome back to another episode of Breaking the Line, where as always, I'm Samuel.
And I'm always Charleton. I mean, yeah, I guess I've
ever-
never been anybody else, honestly.
Well, except for that one time. But we don't talk about it for the FBI.
We don't talk about that.
And we're taking a deep dive into the arts of mime and choreography. But today, instead of a song, is a new beginning, a new opportunity to talk about something special.
Yep.
Every few months or so, we'll do something. And we got a 3-parter for you on this one.
Yeah, we went hard. Like, so for just a little bit of background, this is actually being recorded after we've recorded everything else.
And because we're like, we're going to do this as one episode. And then it took a long time to talk about.
Yeah, we had over an hour's worth of raw footage. So, yeah. So we're going to be splitting it up into 3 parts just for you.
Just
for your short attention spans.
Yeah.
I mean, what? So this part is presentation logistics. So we are going to be talking about not just the songs, like how the lineup should go, but actually the physical properties of stages and the like, things that go into what it takes to physically go to a venue and do things on the stage.
Yep. It won't just be all of the theory, though. We'll talk about some fun stories along the way as far as like presentations that we've done and all the problems that happen with these different stages. So stay tuned for that.
Yep.
Let's get into it.
All right. So the purpose of this podcast in particular is that we, first of all, want to help people with their presentation structures. Like leaders and directors oftentimes don't have really a direction to go because this isn't something that we talk about very commonly in mime. There's also more to give you things to think about because, of course, you can do whatever you want. Mime is an art form. There are plenty of ways that you can go about making your own lineups, how you go about things on the stage, whatever. And that's fine. But we want to give you things to think about, things to consider, so that way you go in educated, you go in prepared.
Yeah.
And we also introduce formulas and present you the pros and cons of it. So, for example, the most common thing that I like to use is what I call the classic presentation structure, which we'll get into later. But it's basically you start with, fun, easy songs and move into more serious songs. But that's not the only way to do it, and nor is it the only way that you should do it. There's a wide variety of purposes for different types of presentation structures and how often you should use them or whatever. So these are just simply, we are presenting you ideas and thoughts, and then do with them what you will. I don't care. So
Yep. Often we go to presentations and these things just happen, and then we're like, we should do that differently next time. And this is kind of our chance to think about them for a little bit and have a conversation about how we'd think through those logistics and the experience that we have, and hoping that you guys get some benefit out of that. Because the first thing we have on here is types of stages. And if you've ever shown up to a presentation and we're like, wait, that's the stage? That's what we're talking about here.
Yep.
So
more than once has the stage itself caused us to go, oh no.
Yes, exactly. So just a couple things to think about. This is kind of more in the theory section.
So the basic stages that we're going to be going over today are first the platform stage, the proscenium stage, the thrust stage, environmental stage, theater in the round, and what I like to call the phantom stage.
How mysterious. I mean, it kind of goes from classic to more obscure and hardly ever done. But with that, we've been on, I can say I've done all these stages.
Yes.
So the classic stage is basically think like a television, or what you're probably thinking of when you think of traditional stage.
Yeah.
It's like there's a rectangle that is the partition between the audience and the performers.
Yep. And usually it's raised, hence platform. So like, for example, you go to a church and you'll notice that the audience is slightly lower than the pastor who's up on stage. It's just simply so that way everybody can see. It's like people have for thousands of years figured out, this needs to be a little bit higher. Mm-hmm. It's just a classic thing that's happened, and that tends to be what 90% of presentations are going to be on.
Right. I would say that's your ideal stage and what you probably will practice on most of the time, unless you're on the floor, not being the platform. So proscenium stage, would you like to tell them?
Yeah, so the proscenium stage is very similar to a platform stage, except it has what we call the apron, which is basically like a nice little rounded arch that comes out the front. Now, for the most part, that doesn't change how you'll present, but it is just kind of something that tends to happen, and you need to be on the lookout for it, especially because you can have things that are going on in, let's say, the downstage corners that don't line up properly with the front of the center stage. What ends up happening is they'll be in more of a triangle shape than it'll be straight line, if that's the case. Like, it's very rare that it'll actually affect anything, just something to think about.
Something we've done in a song, actually, Orphans of God, that took advantage of this. I don't know if we have a clip of this one from the recent recording that we have, but we changed it so that last chorus, everyone lines up in the front of the stage. And when you have an apron stage, instead of them all just standing in a straight line, they actually kind of round off that stage. And so it has this really cool effect of the circular nature where they're all like facing away from each other. And you can kind of barely see each other because you're kind of rounded off on the stage. So there's a way to use it. But often the apron of the stage kind of acts as like the invisible buffer zone between you and the audience, where it's almost a no man's land in some ways. Now, you have to be just aware of that. Do you tell the people doing the parts to go into that so that they have to line up accordingly? Or do you just say kind of don't use that? Something to think about.
Yep. And once again, like these are just considerations. Whatever you do with it, it's just to help you think about these things as you're going. So
yep. All right, thrust stage. Thrust stage is a really interesting one. It is basically where you have three sides. So imagine you just take that stage and you thrust it into the audience. So you got people on this side, on that side, and in the front.
Yep. Now this can be, I would say, one of the more annoying type of stages to use, because when we do mime, typically the classic platform stage is what's in mind. And so the sides will just straight up get blocked off, because like that's not how we do it typically.
Yeah, we tend to have people standing a 00 on the side.
Yeah, exactly. So that does cause you then to need to think about what songs you can present. Because, for example, if we have a song where everybody's in 00 on the sides and, 2/3 of the audience is cut off just constantly, well, you might need to switch up the song. Like, are you going to do instead like a Talk About It, or one of those types of songs where there's a lot of movement and direction, every direction you can see something going on.
Yeah.
So that way it keeps the whole audience engaged as opposed to just the front ones.
Particularly even if it's not a purely thrust stage, sign songs, if we have people kind of on the sides, we'll tell those people on the ends to rotate and face the sides so that they're actually signing to somebody as opposed to leaving those people in the dark. Something we've done traditionally is just instead of a classic 00 in a standing position, they will go down to what we call kneeling 00, which is just a fancy way of saying they're on their knee, but kind of uniform way.
We call it rock
mode.
Rock mode. That sounds great.
Right. Yeah. Become a rock. But yeah, it makes sense. Just kneeling out of the way so that people sides can see. Because as long as there's not a whole wall, most songs I think you can still pull off for a thrust stage. But you just have to be mindful of it and make sure that everyone's involved in the whole time. Yep.
And just a slight thing to think about as well is usually thrust stages have a lot of space, so you can just simply go more upstage. So that way you're further away from what would be considered the general front of the stage, but it does then open you up to the sides a little bit more.
We've done something similar where we've put like an invisible apron, like the apron part of the stage, where we just made it imaginarily rounded, so it worked to the same effect, staying back. Which goes into next one nicely, the environmental stage, where there are no walls between you and the audience. The audience is all around you.
Yep. You are effectively in the audience. So the environmental stage is typically what you'd find in like an outdoor presentation. You are just straight up in the middle of a park or a street. It can also be inside as well. So something else to think about is on indoor stages that you have an environmental type of found stage, like in the middle of, let's say, a mall. You can present, let's say, at a food court. Well, you'll notice that there's a bunch of people around you every direction, people still trying to navigate the mall. And so you want to make sure that you're first out of the way. Second of all, that you get the best captive audience as possible and also have a place that you can lure people in. So if you go to like a food court or something like that, and there's a nice captive audience that they can engage or not at their own leisure, you're not imposing, but you're also preaching the gospel still.
Yep. One that we've used is like when we were at La Mesa, they have like a holiday in the village type thing where the storefront will let us present in front of them, but it's kind of on the street. So there are people walking behind us, even though we're presenting towards the street where all the people are at. And so you just have to be aware of your primary audience. And so we've intentionally sometimes not catered to the people behind us, even though it's an environmental stage, just so that people are kind of have room to walk without being like bothered, but also can come to the front and watch the whole presentation. So again, just being aware, making decisions. Are you trying to cater to everybody, or is it something that you're going to try to encourage them to come to the front so they can watch it properly? Pros and cons.
Yep. Which also something to consider as well in environmental stages is because you have so much space, you also need to limit yourself.
Mm.
So you can't just say, oh, well, we have, 14 square miles of space, let's use the whole thing. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So having this kind of leads into the concept of the phantom stage a little bit, which I'll talk about in a minute, where you give yourself imaginary borders. Like, let's say you're in the middle of a park and there's trees. It's like, okay, from this tree to this tree is our,
Mm-hmm.
sides of the stage. And maybe like you're in front of, let's say, a walking path. And it's like, okay, well, like 3 feet back from the path is where we're going to say is the front of the stage. Those kinds of ideas to give you visual lines for where your stage is. And they also communicate that to your team so they know as well. So that way everybody's on the same page. If you go outside of those borders, it's not that big of a deal, but it's like it gives you something to think about, something to keep you more structured, especially because when you practice, you're practicing within a certain bound and space, and you tend to default to your practice size as well.
No, we've sometimes, for defining boundaries, just said, like, we're going from this parking space line to that parking space line where there's like markings on the ground where essentially you're picking that. We've also chosen to use like props, that since we're bringing props on stage, we'll be like, okay, so this prop is marking like this corner of the stage and that prop's marking that corner, and just kind of have some general boundaries so that people don't expand too far outside of them.
All right, so there's this other strange type of presentation structure called the theater in the round, which is essentially a circle stage. Now, similar to the environmental stage, there are people all around you. However, this is more of a captive audience type thing. Now, I've never presented on one of the theater in the round type stages, but they can happen. And similar to the thrust stages where you see 3, you kind of got to take a lot of the same considerations, but also for all 4 sides.
Yep.
Now, keep in mind, you will have a captive audience on all 4 sides, meaning that you will have to alienate at least a portion of your audience, which nobody likes to do, of course.
From time to time.
Yeah.
So basically, instead of thinking of a back row, that back row is like your center. And so whatever happens in the center, they'll probably be on their knees. If you have, let's say, a main character, they just need to be able to like linger around the outside and move a lot so that everyone's getting a portion where they're the main focus of the audience. You just kind of have to fold in. One thing that the Pennsylvania team did, that I think there's a lot more of these type of stages in like Scotland, where I think they were presenting. They had 2 teams actually doing the same song, just back to back for each other. So they presented this team for that half and that team for that half. And I don't know the exact logistics of that one, but that's at least one option creatively to think through it. Yep.
And it would be really interesting, but this is something that would take a lot of time, is to find a way to fold the song in on itself.
Yep.
So when it comes down to, let's say, a classic song like Courtroom, people are stationed, like the jury is in one place, God is in one place, those kinds of things. Now, what could you do then to make it so the entire audience is engaged in it? Sort of like you were saying, let's say the main walks around God as opposed to just in front of him. What if the jury is not just in one position, but maybe are scattered throughout, maybe surrounding God? Like different things that you can think about to, let's say, instead of making it flat, you kind of like wrap it on itself. Just conceptual things.
Yep.
And then there is also the idea of just not picking songs that work like that, instead picking songs that you can see from all sides, which there aren't many. So that's kind of why I say that may not be the best option.
Yeah. But good thing it's a rare stage.
Yeah, it's pretty rare, but yeah.
All right, and then Phantom stage.
Yep, so the Phantom stage is essentially a smaller stage within a larger stage where you set the boundaries. I've had it happen before where the stage is massive. We're talking like a Broadway musical type stage, like just so big.
There's no way that your team of 15 people can even cover it. This is made for like 50 people or 100 people at once.
Yeah, it's made for like 100 people to be able to all do things like full on dance numbers. And it's just like, that is way too much space. And that's okay. You just do what we like to call a Phantom stage. Like we talked about with the environmental stage, you find something that you say, okay, this is our boundary. If it's actually a stage, sometimes they'll let you put like stage tape on there and say, okay, this is our boundary. Works great. So same thing with the environmental stages apply to that, except you are actually in with a captive audience as opposed to it being just out in the open.
Similar when we go to the San Diego Fair, they won't let us put tape on the stage, but the stage is made out of like individual squares, if you would. So instead of it being a 5 by 3 square stage, we're like, okay, so let's actually just get rid of one of those in the back and 2 on the side. So it's more like 3x2, which the squares were huge. So it's totally fine for our team. One other consideration I think we briefly mentioned, but should hit on it more fully, is the platform stage versus the on the level of the ground stage. Platform is the easiest to see, but very often when you're in anything but a normal stage context, you're going to be even with the audience. And so you have to just be aware anything that happens on your knees, only the front row will be able to see. Yep. And so you have to kind of either change choreography. So anyone that's on their knees maybe does that part briefly where they fall down and get back up and continue doing it. You can't be on your knees and be an important part for more than like a few seconds.
True. Yep. Unless you're just straight up being removed from the song. So for example, if you're Jesus dying,
go figure.
You die or on the ground and then you're, removed from the song, whatever, put in the tomb or however it might go.
Yep.
Those are times where it's okay. But yeah, generally speaking, if you have a lot of people on the ground, like you're on your knees signing for, a whole chorus or something like that, then yeah, pretty much only the front row and then maybe a couple of the rows after that are going to be able to see what you're doing.
Yep. So just be aware of having them make those edits on the fly. All right. So then stage sizing. As we talk about stages, this is one of my favorite topics just because when we put out like new songs to people like, oh man, I don't have enough room for this thing. I'm like, no, let me tell you, when we presented on the streets, we presented literally on a street corner with like 15 people. Like this is a 3x5 foot spot. We got 15 people to do courtroom on. Small stages happen and you just have to be able to be really flexible and know who your audience is and where you're presenting it for. Mm-hmm. So yeah, small stages, they're a thing. So like get creative.
Yeah. Because the main thing to think about with a small stage is, first of all, if you don't have enough space for everybody, first of all, can you readjust? So can you move people to different positions that will make it so you can fit them? And if you can't readjust, then you can always just do a different song. That's not illegal.
Yep. Nope. And some of it's just maybe even where you have people placed. If they're on their knees, they're actually a lot smaller than standing up. So you can readjust just simply by squishing around. Yeah. And if you're on a street corner, to whoever was trying to walk and cross the street legally, I'm sorry that we got in your way. I don't suggest that spot anymore for presenting, but just be aware if there's people that actually need to go, like just let them through your stage. All right, and then large stage. Too much stage, we talked about the phantom stage as an option already. But yes, also you can stretch the stage pretty easily. Most songs, it's not going to be an issue that it's too big. In fact, it actually gives you more leverage. But you will need to tell your people to actually move their feet. Because if they need to get from one spot to another and they're bigger stage than normal, they're going to have to move.
Yep. Especially for songs where you march rhythmically. Mm-hmm. Because if you're just walking naturally, you can just go a little bit faster. But if you're marching, you only have, let's say, like 12 steps that are allotted to you. So you need to make sure you're making big, huge steps for getting clear across the stage if you don't have enough time. So things like that, just small considerations, make sure people get into their positions. And there is kind of I would say a maximum width that you'd want to go. So let's take, for example, like the ending positions in America Again, where everybody's nice and spread out and doing like signs and stuff like that of what the song is. There is a point at which everybody's just way too separated that it doesn't look good.
Cohesive, yeah.
But for the most part, you have just so much liberty on how much distance you can take between each person. So
that's true.
You got plenty of options. Don't be scared to spread out, but also if it doesn't look good, don't be scared to reel it in just a little bit,
Exactly. All right. Then we got the narrow stage. So this is one where we've taken the back and just squished everybody to a nice little line of people. And especially when you have a lot of people on this kind of stage, just even getting past each other is like kind of annoying. If you have a row of people in 00 and then the two people have to like cross in the front, they're like, oh, excuse me. But it happens from time to time. Yeah. I don't know, do you want to share your experience with this one?
So I have a video of just back in, the Stone Ages when I was first starting mine, where we had this exact problem. We did America Again, and it was a team of, I would say around 15-ish people. And we had to do that entire song on just the apron of a proscenium stage. And so we had like the curtains are down, and I'll show a video of this. We have the curtains down, and we have maybe like 6 feet, I would say, between the curtains and the front of the stage. That's not enough space to do like anything.
Yep.
So usually America Again has lots of windows and a lot of distance between the front and the back. We just simply squished it all together, and we're more or less in like a line, maybe like a second,
like a W kind of line,
like a really squiggly line.
Yeah.
And it worked. Like honestly, I don't even think that the song looks that much different. In some cases, it actually looks better than what it could have been, because it could have been that everybody's in just one straight line and it looks
Right.
uninspired, but instead we have some layering, we have some sectioning of the stage and things like that still worked out great. Just, go for that.
Yep. So think about what songs you need to do and how you align them. And then finally, objects on stage. And as a person who loves flags, I've hit many a piano and many a very important, expensive thing on stage that I shouldn't have hit. And it's just the nature of trying to throw big flashy flags that go all over the place and need all this space. So just be aware of objects on stage, both for flags and also objects that you have to work around. Often, like, there's a piano on stage when you're trying to do courtroom, and your jury just kind of like molds around the piano now. But there's nothing else we can do other than just think about how we're best staging it in the exact instance that you have.
Yep.
Or sometimes there's a baptismal.
So this happened at a church relatively recently, actually, within the last year, where I presented a solo song of Thief to my church. And
the dying sequence.
It went great. So there was a baptismal, like, front and center. And we're not talking like, oh, it was just down below or it was up in the back or anything like that. We're talking it was in the front of everything. And the baptismal went up to like belly level.
Yes. It was very obvious.
It was there and there was no way to get around it. So I ended up having to get a little bit creative, and ultimately the main thing was like some of the parts you have to go down on your knees. I just didn't. Or if I did, I went very like down on my knees for just a moment. And then there's the dying sequence at the end, which ended up just turning out really funny because there wasn't really a way to get around it.
Yep. You're just falling into, which ironically, as the thief, one of the questions that gets brought up theologically about baptism is if the thief ever got baptized, if it's necessary for salvation. So and in this case,
in this one, it did.
The thief got baptized.
Oh, man. Yep. And so it ended up being like there's really a silly point where I'm just like reaching up out of the baptismal as I'm going down.
No, you were in the baptismal, but all that to say is like from the audience. Exactly.
Yep. And so like also to consider then, not only was the baptismal in the way, it also was in the way for the most part of a bunch of the audience.
Yep.
Now, it kind of has the opposite problem as being on a stage on the ground, where
having
the front row
on your knees. Yeah.
Yeah. The front row people don't see you, but the back row people do.
That's funny.
The irony,
Yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of the things to consider, and just getting around it by, first of all, are you able to remove things from the stage, even with like the 10 seconds that you have? Like if there's a piano on stage, are you able to move the piano? Or
right. And with anything that's a musical instrument, just knowing that you need permission for those things ahead of time. Even if a guitar seems easy to move, you don't know how much it's worth to the person, even if it's an inexpensive guitar in and of itself. There's just a level of consideration you just need to be careful. But most of the time, and I can say this as a musician as well, most of the time moving music stands or other types of things that are easy to move back is not a big deal. But anything that's more expensive, like pedal boards or things that are electronic, you should make sure you get permission ahead of time or work out those logistics.
Yep.
All right. Something else to consider that we've run into is if your presentation is outside or inside, because when it's outside, it could rain. Have you ever done a presentation in the snow? I'm curious. I've never.
In the snow? No.
It's something obvious. I mean, I live in San Diego. I didn't see snow until I was like 21, like literally. Okay. I could say I saw snow from like an airport. I'll put it that way, watching it outside. I didn't experience.
I saw pictures of snow.
I didn't make my first snow angel until I was, I think, dating Jessica. Like 2016-ish or, ridiculous. So yes, I'm San Diegan. But I had presented in rain. One of my favorite stories of the rain is we were at La Mesa and we looked at the weather forecast like we were supposed to. And they were like, there's a chance that it rains, but there's lots of people here. We have about a 60-minute set. And so we set up all our stuff. And it was just like a mist at that point. We're like, no, this is fine. We're not babies. We could do this. So we start our set and about 15 minutes in. It's raining a little bit more, but we're like, we're already a little bit wet. We'll just keep going. And I kid you not, by the end of it, it was just like downpouring. The only people watching us were like our parents and a few people with umbrellas, like hiding. It was like really cold and very wet, but we're all soaked at this point. So we're like, we're going to just finish the set list. Something we did not consider doing the song Gloria is that we needed to take Calvin and, lay him on the ground. And as we move and present on the street, there's a pothole there with that is filled with water. And so as I'm laying him down, I'm like, nope, this is where he's going. Sorry. Drenched and back. But made for a lot of fun memories. I think you've presented in the rain, right?
I presented in the rain. Nothing as crazy as that,
one,
but like
that one was just exponentially compounded, and so it just added to the story.
Yeah, of course. Like, and what's super ironic too is that presenting in the rain often doesn't change how you present. It just makes it less comfortable, a bit more cold.
Yes.
But then there is also the audience consideration where if people are watching you, like, are they even being able to pay attention because of what's going on?
Yep.
So just things to think about.
One thing that we've done, if it's really cold, and by really cold, I mean San Diego cold, like maybe 40 outside.
It gets that cold here?
Exactly. No, we've done, we tell everyone ahead of time, wear your presentation stuff, but we'll put a black long sleeve underneath so that it matches the presentation attire, goes basically up to the glove line, and keeps everyone a little bit warmer. I don't prefer it because I'm already plenty warm when we present. We present at Lake La Mesa, and you'll see like this steam cloud come up above me because it's cold outside and I'm still plenty warm. But regardless, it is something we've done to help prevent some weather issues.
Yep. And on a similar vein, like we've told people to bring jackets or hoodies or whatever.
Zip jackets. Do not bring a normal traditional hoodie because if you're in paint, it's very difficult to get off.
So I was going to say, I usually recommend the zip up jackets, but people have brought hoodies anyways, and it's a lot more uncomfortable. Not impossible to not mess up your makeup, but
just have to be aware.
A zip up jacket is way better. And, that usually counteracts the cold. And also it keeps your, presenting attire drier as well. Because then if it's raining and stuff like that, when you take it off, it's like, okay, well, it looks a little bit nicer, at least for the beginning of the presentation. Like
exactly.
At some point, it's like, okay, well, we just gotta deal with it.
No, I think my favorite story is when they presented at the Capitol steps when it was raining and the Bibles got soaked doing America Again and Go and all these songs. You could talk to some of the Pox. I think it was Gabe that was at least on that mission trip. I don't think we have any clips of that one. Go figure. In the rain.
Yeah.
On the flip side, though, in a really sunny conditions, you may not know this, but white face paint does not act as sunscreen. Like you see the lifeguards using that white stuff on their nose, that's actual sunscreen. White face paint does not count. And so if you are, fair skinned like myself, you will develop a red ring all the way around your face. And it's very obvious.
It's what we affectionately call the mime tan.
The mime tan.
in a similar vein to like a watch tan or a glasses tan, it's the same exact concept.
It's hideous. It's
because
so bad.
The makeup covers it. And makeup is, SPF 1 million.
Yes.
But the rest of your skin is not. And so, yes, it has happened where you'll have a nice little ring around there. Just avoid that by applying sunscreen underneath.
Yep. Just
easy as that.
Do it ahead of time. Also be aware of part tans, ladies. If you have your hair parted in a certain way, that is one of the more painful burns you can get. Because, what are you going to do? Yes, I understand putting sunscreen in your hair. Greasy mess. It's better than the burn. I have gotten a part tan before and it hurts. All right. Anything else with outdoor presentations? Lightning.
I mean, I feel like that just
you probably shouldn't do that.
if there's lightning right on the stage, maybe just don't present. You know what? You have my full blessing to just leave. No, but generally think about before every single presentation, just check the forecast. Honestly, most of the time it's it's going to be, 70 degrees. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be fine.
Yep, so don't assume.
Whatever. It's going to be fine. But don't assume because you know what they say about assuming.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
All right. And that brings us into location. Because it is something to consider, not just when you're outside, there's a lot of options most of the time. So what are some factors you might throw out there for picking your stage if you're outside?
Yeah. So first of all, kind of what we talked about in environmental stages is make sure that you're in a place where everybody can see. Because if you are presenting in, let's say, a park or something like that, and there's, you're here and everybody else is over there, and you have vendors over there, and you have let's say the beach is over there. You're in the middle of nowhere. That's not a good position. Go find a place. Maybe there's several different groups of people that you could present to. Find one that, first of all, invites the most people. Second of all, has, let's say, a comfortable stage, because you don't want to present on a, the 45-degree incline.
Right. Uncomfortable for your audience too. Are you expecting them to stand, or is there seating available or shade? Those are all factors you can think of.
Yep.
All right, and then setup time. Sometimes when you're outside, you need to find a plug. That's a very logistical issue, power. We've done a couple different options for that. We have a generator. It is an expensive investment, but it I think is worth it on the overhaul so that you can set up a sound system. But honestly, if you buy a nice speaker these days and that's battery powered, assuming that you've charged it and the battery still works like intended, most of them will last either an hour to 2 or 3 hours straight. So that would be the better investment at this point. Um, Try to find a speaker that, I mean, even the one we bought for like $8 at Walmart is pretty sufficient. You need to make sure it's big enough so that it can be loud enough, but that way your setup time as far as sound logistics is way easier.
Oh yeah,
You set up the Bluetooth and forget about it.
yep. It used to be back in the AIM days when in AIM Branson, we literally had a full-fledged sound system that we would sometimes bring, and we're talking like big box speakers, multiple of them, and then like I guess we didn't really have a soundboard, but it was something miniature enough that we had to connect an iPod, and people still used iPods, to the sound system, which then connected to the speakers. And what do you know? That was like a full cart's worth of equipment.
Yes.
Nowadays, people have gotten a bit more efficient. Like we got speaker, iPhone,
music
or
player,
like
your
that,
phone,
music player of some kind to play the music off of. Boom, you're done. And super nice, especially make sure it's charged. But if it is, then you can just literally go find a place that it works, set it down, hit play, bam, you're done.
Yeah, I'd still say it's worth considering for longer presentations, or if you're going to do multiple part and you can't have time to recharge. Sometimes just having a place where there's an outlet that you can charge back up or keep it plugged in is nice. So just consider it.
Yep. And also with setup as well as think about props. Whenever you bring props on stage, like a principle that I've always abided by is you bring whatever props you are going to use, and more specifically the props that you are going to use first. Because like, let's say 5 different people could use the Jesus sash. Whoever has the Jesus sash first, they are the ones to take it. And then it is a slight logistical issue to make sure that all of the props, when they transition to the next song, are in the right place. But that's something that you should hash out during practice. Like if you can do like a dress rehearsal, just to say, okay, well, this needs to be over there, that needs to be over there, et cetera, et cetera.
Cool.
And something else to consider about outdoor stages is lighting. If you're presenting at night, oftentimes it might not be bright. So of course, obviously don't pick a place that doesn't have any lighting, but it is possible that you can bring your own lighting. I've seen some people do that. Maybe not the most preferred way, but sure, why not?
Yeah, but you just have to make sure that especially if your presentation starts when it's still light out and then it gets dark, at that point, there's not really a way to get time to set up. So you just have to know that you need them ahead of time.
Yep. And if you have limited lighting, like let's say you bring your own and it's just one unit, make sure that the people who are, we'll say downstage, the main focus of the song is lit up, because people in 00 don't have to be lit up. As long as it's like there's a level of safety.
Main portion, yeah.
Yeah, the main portion needs to be lit up, but as long as people can see, like, they're not going to fall over and fall off the stage or something like that.
Yeah.
Then, you don't have to worry about people.
It's fine. Yeah. I will say also with lighting, some lights are very hot. And so you just need to be aware that your performers might actually be sweating, even if it's cold outside, because you're literally like blasting energy at them. Go figure. So just be aware of that, and where you place your lights. If they can be a little bit further away, it both gives audience a little bit more permission to be closer and more lighting to the stage.
Yep.
All right. That's kind of the logistics for outdoor stages. A few things that we should think with indoor stages. Indoor stages often have ceilings, and we've hit many a ceiling in incidental ways. One good example is this wasn't the ceiling so much, but there's a wire on one of the stages we presented, and during the song, Katie is supposed to do a backflip. Literally, I think we just covered that one in Celebrating Jesus. And so, right before the backflip, we just had to be very aware of where we were standing, because we didn't want to be over that little wire when let her kick it, or I don't know, something else weird happened. So just be aware of your surroundings on those. Other examples of being aware of ceilings?
Yep. There are several songs. 2 examples that I think are pretty classic songs are Go and End of the Beginning. Both of those 2 songs, you'll notice that Jesus gets crucified and then he gets lifted up. Most of the time, people are just like usually, 6 foot or under, and like it's not really that big of a deal. But when you take a person and you lift them an additional like 3 or 4 feet, well, now you're actually talking, if there are lower ceilings, you need to make sure, first of all, you don't just shove them straight into the ceiling. It's not good. Second of all, you need to consider if there are like if there are beams or something that would impede view so people don't even see them, just lower a little bit. Or if they're, whatever the case might be, just something to consider. If the ceiling is not high enough for you to give them a full raise, just lower them a little bit. As long as they can be seen, that's about it.
Yep. So just be aware of some of those logistics on stage. All right, so that's all the presentation logistics that you want to think through. Obviously, take each one as it comes and just be ready, be flexible. The key word in ministry is flexibility. That's literally one of our core values for AIM.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a lot of words you could use for ministry, but the idea of just you are there to serve other people's needs and getting them the gospel. So we will become all things to all people in that way. We're going to flex and make this stage work, and even street corners so we can proclaim the gospel. But links down below for some of the videos that we talked about, or if you have not heard about what we're doing, then, there's that intro video for the whole podcast. Anything else we need to tell them, Charleton?
No, I don't think. Mash that like sky!
Yeah. As always, I'm Samuel.
And I'm Charleton.
Breaking the line.